Family business makes no sense. So let's talk about it.
Welcome to another thrilling episode of Family Business Makes No Sense. Today we're talking about cause number 9 of family business conflict: differences, conflicting wants, needs and interests. This series explores the idea that family business as a concept makes no sense. And that's because family and business should never be put together. They are completely opposing concepts. The success factors for each almost diametrically oppose the corresponding success factors of the other. And therefore, if you're either daft or game enough to involve your family in a business, you have got to be prepared for conflicts to arise, and you've got to have processes for directing those conflicts down constructive pathways to create creativity rather than destructive pathways that could end up destroying the family and the business. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, and I'm broadcasting today from Melbourne in Australia. I've worked for many years with a great many families to help them resolve the conflicts that are damaging their families and their businesses. And over that period, I've learnt that the vast majority of conflicts, even though they may appear to be about money and entitlements, are almost always much more about damaged relationships, deep buried resentments, and a general sense of unfairness. Consequently, solving the problems that lie at the root cause of the conflict that's arisen is going to be far more successful if you do that using empathic, pragmatic problem solving rather than legal threats, rational arguments, and emotional blackmail. We want to bring the family and the business out the other side in better shape. So we need to be smart about how we deal with conflict rather than running away from it in the first place. So today we're talking about another piece of the jigsaw: differences. We're going to look at what conflicting needs, wants and interests mean in terms of the total matrix of conflicts that may and do and have developed in your family business environment. If it's of interest to you, please settle back and come along for the ride. Let's start out by defining what we're talking about here. Differences. Sounds innocent enough, but for our purposes, which is basically conflict resolution and conflict prevention, we need to understand that differences are basically two or more people's needs, wants and interests that are perhaps not aligned, or if they're already moving into dangerous territory, are actually clashing up against each other. So first of all, we need to understand what are needs, wants and interests, and why does it matter? Wants are what most people are familiar with. We identify a goal, we identify something that we would like to achieve, a specific outcome, and that is a want that we believe is important to us and that we then try to assert to others to get them to help satisfy that particular want of ours. A want is very different to a need. A want can be constructed, it can be affected by your mood at the time, it can be affected by the weather, it can be a very transitory item. Whereas a need is something very much more fundamental. A need is a requirement that you have that must be satisfied for you to feel comfortable, secure, safe. So a need is something that is much deeper and is something that really isn't negotiable, because if your need is not met, you will not be happy no matter what. Whereas if a want is met or is compromised, which I consider a dreadful word, if it is negotiated into some other space, you might be perfectly happy with that. And that's because you've satisfied the underlying need, even if you've changed the perception of what the want really was. Now, underlying all of this and what draws it all together and what then we use to form the basis of the technique called interest-based negotiation is concept of interests. Interests are underlying motivators. So they are something that's deep within us that basically represents our values. Our values come from our character and our personality. It's the way we're made, the way we think, the way we're built, the way we feel. These are the things deep down, even below the needs, that make us do what we do the way we do it. So they create the needs, some of which get expressed as wants. So I need you to have a clear idea of the difference between needs, wants and interests, because these are going to become very important. Needs and interests effectively can be characterized as the underlying causes that we need to address if we are going to resolve a conflict or a problem in a sustainable way. So once it is fixed, it won't pop up again. Whereas wants are more like the visible symptoms, the tip of the iceberg, if you like. The things that you can see, but if you fix the wants, you may not have a lasting solution. So for example, let's take a bushfire analogy. We can see the flames, we can smell the smoke, we can feel the heat. These are all symptoms of a fire. We can pour water on the fire and put the fire out. But if the reason that the fire occurred in the first place is because there's far too much dry standing underbrush in an area that is constantly subject to lightning strikes, unless we have a way of stopping the lightning strikes, we need to clear the brush or there's going to be more fire in all likelihood. So if by addressing the cause, we will not get any more symptoms. If we just address the symptoms, we haven't removed the cause and the problem will still be there. And if we take that into a family negotiation, exactly the same principles apply, and we don't want to be back in Groundhog Day all the time, where we keep revisiting old resentments and old problems within a family group. We want to get on with the life. So let me give you a little case study drawn from several families I've been working with just over the last 12 months or so. And these are a composite. It's not any one family. There is no family I've worked with called the doleful family, but I'm going to call them that. But elements of the problems I'm going to describe were present in each of these three different families. Mum and Dad started a business over 50 years ago. They're now in their mid-80s, and it's an import business. They bring screws and fasteners into the country, which they buy mainly in Southeast Asia. The business has grown very well, and it is now turning over $15 million a year. It's quite profitable, and over the period, the family has acquired a number of property assets, warehouses, shops, etc., in addition to the family owning its own homes. So the total package is now worth well upwards of $25 million. The son and daughter-in-law of the owners have been working in the business for well over 30 years, since they were basically plucked out, well, since Henrik was plucked out of school, and when he married Marta, she came into the business as well. They have been massively underpaid for the efforts and the sacrifices and responsibilities that they've made. Mum and Dad have given them gifts from time to time, which has just made them feel a bit resentful and dependent. But they could have earned maybe twice as much as they have actually earned had they been working out in the general market. Now they don't have any choice other than staying in the business, and Henrik is currently the CEO, and he's quite good at being a CEO with a lot of homespun wisdom. He's done some self-improvement and study. So he does a really solid, if not an inspired job. He's not an inspiring sort of person, but he is solid as anything and deeply loyal. Over the years, there's no question in the family that Henrik and Marta have been promised that one day when we retire, the business and all the associated assets will be yours. And there's been a recognition over the years that they have worked at a much reduced salary to support the parents, help them get plenty of money out of the business to prepare for their own retirement, build family wealth, and generally make their lives easier. So there's no argument about that, and it's even documented in various attempts they've had at estate planning and so on in the past. Everything's held in family trust, so nobody really owns anything, but the transfers can be made quite readily and supported by deeds of family arrangement and the like. However, when it came to the retirement date of 70, which had been planned for many years, the owner, Johan, found that he really didn't want to retire. He didn't have a plan, he hadn't developed another rock to go to, and so he stayed in place well beyond his 70s into his 80s. Wasn't doing a lot in the business, thankfully, because he really had gone beyond his use-by date. He was a good brand ambassador. He was good for sort of rallying the troops from time to time, but really all of the real work had been taken over by Henrik well before Johan hit 70, and that was now 13 years earlier. They finally decided to retire. They finally decided to pass everything across to Henrik and Marta, as they'd always promised and as everyone expected. And all of a sudden, at just that time, Medusa, their daughter, who was a couple of years younger than Henrik, at 48 compared to his 50, emerges from a dreadful divorce after 20 years of being in an abusive and violent marriage. She's got 2 children affected by severe fetal alcohol syndrome, who will need, because of their intellectual and physical disabilities, to be supported for their entire lives. Just to compound things, Medusa is a very good cabaret singer, but now she's approaching 50, her looks and her voice are showing serious signs of the hard life that she's lived and the constant drug and alcohol abuse that's been part of that life. She doesn't have any other skills, talents, or means of support, and so as a performance artist, she is now coming in and making a whole song and dance about how the family owes her, how her brother Henrik was always the favoured child because he had a soft feather bed in Dad's business and he never really had to get out there and risk himself, whereas she was really out there doing all these great things, even if they didn't turn out so well for her. And she is really playing the emotional blackmail card with both of her parents, saying that Henrik was always the favoured child, she's never got anything, which is completely untrue, because she really was the apple of her father's eye, and he gave her lots of gifts and a lot of monetary support over the years. And mother has been supporting her financially through the divorce and for many of the last years, which has drained a lot of the spare cash the parents had to retire with. But this has now introduced a whole wild card into the conversation, because up until the time this happened, when Medusa ended up with having to give up the house to get 100% custody of the children and then take on that responsibility, she just wasn't on the scene. She wasn't on the family's radar, other than in a very private way for support. Now, seeing that the power is shifting to her brother and seeing the assets shifting there as well, she wants in. She wants a share of the business. She wants to be employed by the business, although nobody knows quite what she's going to do there. And she wants commitments from the family to support her and her children for the rest of their lives, using the business as a family asset, which is something that's been talked about many, many times. Now, if you wanted to create a table of the different wants, needs, and interests of each of the 5 characters, the 2 parents, Henrik and Marta, and Medusa, forget about even the kids below that, if you wanted to create a matrix of wants, needs, and interests, there would be an awful lot of clashes in there, as I'm sure you can imagine. If you want more detail, you'll have to read my book, Family Business Makes No Sense, which will be out sometime in 2025, we hope. But I just say that to illustrate how, with the changing sands and with the lack of proper planning and the lack of discipline in the family to anticipate a problem and so as to eliminate the risk of it occurring and upending the family, you can end up in what's technically known as a schmozzle. So what strategies and solutions do we recommend for attempting to, first of all, prevent severe differences from arising and creating conflict, or how to deal with differences that have turned into conflict, how to deal with them and get them resolved in a practical way once they have established themselves? Well, the first thing obviously for prevention is you've got to be aware of what's going on in the family. You've got to be aware of those different needs, wants, interests of all of your family members. You've got to be looking ahead to how that may play out in the future. And you need to put things in place like family plans and maybe family constitution, deeds of arrangement and so on. Essentially things that the family has discussed, agreed, documented, so that there is at least a guideline or guardrails. When things do start to go wobbly, you've got some guidance to stop them falling off completely. Now, that's all well and good, but the reason why I get involved is usually because families haven't done that, or they've done it too late, or they haven't done it at all, or they've done it and then they haven't enforced it, which has actually made things worse than not doing it in the first place. So we then say, how do we deal with this? We've got Medusa in there prancing around, making very loud, very aggressive approaches towards the parents, playing on the heartstrings, emotional blackmail on the one side, tears, floods, massive performance, impressive to see. On the other side, you've got the loyal Henrik, stodgy, uninspiring, solid as a rock, committed to help the family. And he will, there's no doubt in my mind, he would help Medusa and her kids without needing to be asked. But at the moment, his goodwill is being severely tested by Medusa's demands, which are arguably extremely unreasonable, because they're just not based on anything other than she's made a lot of mistakes in her life and now she wants the family to dig her out of a hole, and the lack of ability of the parents to step in, calm things down and say, look, here's the deal, this is what we're going to do, this is how we make it work. What the family needs almost certainly is an experienced mediator or facilitator to help them have a calm conversation which is based not on positional bargaining, where people state their positions and their wants and then throw everything at everybody else to try and win massive compromises. Instead, we want to go into interest-based negotiation, where the facilitator helps to uncover those interests, underlying interests that we talked about, and the real needs that we talked about, so you can then, on a more factual, more readily understandable basis, work out what have we got to satisfy everybody and address those needs in a way that enables everybody to love everybody else, including themselves, the next morning. So the interest-based negotiation is a constructive, collaborative negotiation process where I think of it as, let's deconstruct the problem, spread the entrails over a big table, fossick through the entrails of the problems, toss out the bits that we can't make good use of or that are cancerous or otherwise toxic. And once we've got rid of that, put all the bits back together again, sew the carcass back together in a healthier form, and then support it into a future that's a hell of a lot better than the past, and certainly a hell of a lot better than the future was going to be had they not found a way of accommodating everybody's needs and interests. So we deconstruct to reconstruct, and then we make commitments from everybody willingly as to what they will do, won't do, can do, can't do into the future, but they are prepared and willing to do, so there are no resentments in the family, and with any luck, all of the family members have learnt some skills on the way through and agreed to adopt some systems for problem solving and conflict resolution into the future. If you found value in listening today, thank you. I'm glad I've helped. Please give us a like. Please sign up for future episodes. There's one coming out every week until we've got through 50 of these. And the next one, cause number 10, is an interesting one because we're going to be talking about mindsets and the impact that different mindsets have on mental health and capabilities in a business family environment. And of course, if you know anybody else who you think may benefit from the stuff we've been talking about today, please feel free to pass on the details because we'd love to have them on board. We're trying to get the word out, how to make family business make more sense. I'm Jon Kenfield, the Family Business Solutionist, signing off. Thanks for watching. Bye.